In September of 2023, I secretly moved out of my parents' house and told them the day after I left. I currently live in a 2-bedroom apartment my friend owns with her brother and his girlfriend. My friend lives with her boyfriend somewhere else. I work an alright job that gives me enough money to live on every month. Yes, I could be saving much more, but being by myself is more important to me. Since September, our relationship has taken many turns, but mostly slightly for the better. Sometime during this, my parents convinced themselves that my move was temporary to get a feel for being independent. But ultimately, I will be coming back home this fall. This couldn't be further from the truth, as I have never said or agreed to this, but they are the type who, if you are not saying what they want to hear, then they are not listening. For context, I am the first daughter of African parents and grew up in a controlling household. Recently, my mom has been throwing crying fits in efforts to convince me to move back home. I have let her know that my decision is based on what I want right now and my proximity to the workplace, but she does not care. They recently bought a $2 million house we can barely afford and added me on there as a co-borrower for the mortgage. I know this was a terrible decision and really did not want to sign, but they had already put down the $80,000 deposit, and I felt like I had no other choice. I have 3 siblings, the youngest of whom are 12 and 5. But I don't know what to do about my mother constantly claiming I do not properly love the family, and that is why I have moved out. I'm only 20 minutes away, and I visit once every 3 to 4 weeks for the weekend. She has a habit of going through my stuff. A few months ago, she went through the bag I brought to the house and found a packet of edibles alongside attention deficit hyperactivity disorder pills and made me flush it down the toilet. I did, but last night she went through my old closet and found an old packet of edibles. Anyway, she has latched onto drugs as the only reasoning for my behavior. She says they are making me immune and insensitive to her tears. I'm not sure how to go about this. I know I do not want to move back in. I was never allowed to live in university, in fact. My efforts to do so were sabotaged, but I have tried to move past everything they have done. Instead, when my mom forces me to listen to her lectures and I try to talk to her, she says painful things like, I wouldn't have graduated university if it wasn't for them being close enough to help me. Not the truth at all. And still, I find myself unable to do things I truly want, like get tattoos even at 24 because I am so worried about their reaction. But it feels like I am fighting a losing battle. Does anyone know how to move forward with this? TLDR. Mother using tears to guilt tripped me into moving back home after I have expressed that I do not want to for reasons not completely tied to her. How to navigate. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I think you might struggle to get good advice, given that your background is rather different than most Redditors. That said, I think it's quite important that you stop visiting your parents' home and don't let her visit you either. Ideally, she wouldn't know where you lived at all. It will be much more difficult for her to lecture you in a public place. You'll need /r/legal advice, or the subreddit for your country for the mortgage problem. It's going to go awful for your credit rating if they default on it. It's quite important that you don't co-sign anything else, and consider locking your credit so they can't use it against your will. How does she respond when you try to change the subject to something more neutral? Most people have a topic or two that they just love talking about. It's not a losing battle. She just knows how to push all of your buttons, because she installed them. What you need to do is stop responding. It will get worse as you set and maintain boundaries, but it does get easier after that. Comment 2. Yeesh, and I thought my mother-in-law was bad. Point blank, foreign parents often have a different outlook. In my experience, it's very difficult to get them to change that outlook. You really just have to force them to accept it by doing what you think is right for yourself. First things first, try to get yourself a lawyer to get off of that mortgage. This was an attempt by your parents to trap you. Don't accept it. All in all, they're probably going to go through many manipulation tactics to try to get you to move back in with them. All you can do is make it 100% non-negotiable to even discuss with them. When they mention you moving back, just tell them that isn't what you want, and you won't discuss it further. If your mom starts crying, tell her no decisions will be changed, and you're firm on it. I know it's much easier said than done, but if you don't take rather extreme measures, you'll be under their thumb forever. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. So, 3 days ago, my mom called me out of the blue and said she was coming over to my apartment. I was caught off guard because she had never visited me here before. She showed up with my dad, and they both looked really serious. They sat me down and told me they had something important to discuss. My heart was racing because I had no idea what was coming. They started talking about the mortgage and how they were struggling to keep up with the payments. They said they needed me to move back home to help out financially. I was shocked because I had no idea things were that bad. They had always acted like everything was fine. I told them I couldn't move back because I needed my independence, and my job was closer to my apartment. My mom started crying again, saying I was being selfish and that family should come first. I felt trapped. I didn't want to move back, but I also didn't want to see my family struggle. I told them I would think about it and let them know in a few days. They left, and I felt a mix of anger and guilt. I called my friend who owns the apartment and told her what happened. She was really supportive and said I could stay as long as I needed. The next day, I went to visit my parents to talk things over. When I got there, my mom was in a better mood, but my dad looked stressed. They told me they had found a way to refinance the mortgage, but they still needed my help. They asked if I could contribute more financially without moving back home. I agreed to help out with some extra money each month, but I made it clear that I wasn't moving back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how my parents had put me in this position. I felt like they were using me to fix their mistakes. I decided to talk to my siblings about it. My younger sister, who is 12, told me she overheard our parents talking about how they were counting on me to come back home. She said they were really worried about losing the house. I felt torn. On one hand, I wanted to help my family, but on the other hand, I didn't want to give up my independence. I decided to talk to my boss at work to see if I could get a raise or more hours. My boss was understanding and said they would see what they could do. I felt a bit better knowing I might be able to help out more financially without moving back home. The next day, I went to visit my parents again. This time, I brought up the idea of selling the house and downsizing to something more affordable. My mom got really upset and said she didn't want to move. She said the house was a symbol of their hard work and success. My dad was more open to the idea, but he said it would be a last resort. I left feeling frustrated. It seemed like my parents were more concerned about appearances than practical solutions. I decided to take a step back and focus on my own life for a bit. I went out with some friends that night and tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were going to get worse before they got better. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. She said she had found some old letters in my room and wanted to talk about them. I went over to their house, and she showed me the letters. They were from an old friend I had lost touch with years ago. The letters talked about how controlling my parents were and how I needed to break free. My mom was furious and said the letters were proof that I had been planning to leave for a long time. I felt like I was being attacked from all sides. I told my mom that the letters were from a difficult time in my life and that I had moved past it, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was ungrateful and that I didn't appreciate everything they had done for me. I left feeling defeated and unsure of what to do next. That night, I got a call from my boss. They said they had found a way to give me more hours and a small raise. I was relieved and felt like I could finally help my family without giving up my independence. I called my parents and told them the good news. My dad was happy, but my mom was still upset. She said it wasn't enough and that I needed to move back home. I felt like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of guilt and obligation. I decided to take a break from visiting my parents and focus on my own life for a while. I started going to therapy to help me deal with the stress and guilt. My therapist helped me see that I needed to set boundaries with my parents and focus on my own well-being. Over the next few days, I started to feel better. I was able to contribute more financially to my parents without moving back home, and I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life. But I knew things were still far from perfect. My mom was still upset, and I knew it would take time for her to accept my decision. In the meantime, I started reconnecting with old friends and focusing on my own happiness. I realized that I couldn't please everyone, and that was okay. I needed to live my own life and make my own decisions, even if it meant disappointing my parents. Thanks for reading. Aita for dumping my boyfriend. after he admitted he had stronger feelings for another woman. I have a problem with my boyfriend. We have been together for almost 5 years now. Last year, around May 23rd, we were on a break, broke up in June, and got back together in August. So I already gave him a chance. During our break, he started talking with a girl who was working with him. She had a boyfriend during all this time. They talked all summer with periods where they talked every day, from what he told me. And when we got back together in August, he mentioned her. But at that time, he told me nothing happened, and I ignored the thing completely. The thing I don't really like was his reaction to her sleeping with one of his colleagues' friends now. It was the second time we spoke of it, and in both instances, he seemed resentful towards her and with his friend. Of course, this reaction was a red flag and a warning signal. Then he visited me finally because we're long distance. And of course, I had to look into his phone, and what I saw was traumatizing. I saw a message of March 24th where they finally called things off because she was tired of his behavior. And the one that got hurt was him, basically. She waited months for him to break up with me, but he didn't. They've been talking for months, even when we got back together in August. This continued until March. They used to go out quite often, having lunch and dinners. And one of the last messages is the classic one, of two people breaking up even if I didn't find any "I love you." The message from him was something along the lines of, "I don't even know why I'm writing to you. I shouldn't do it. I would do everything we did from May 2023 to today again, because you are the only person who made me feel alive. I would do it all again. I will never find anyone like you. You are unique. It would be easier if I just had a crush on you. This is so painful. I don't know what to do." My boyfriend has always been the good guy, and it is really hard for me to accept that he manipulated both me and this girl at the same time. He enjoyed saying to her that I was jealous of her because he enjoyed seeing us fighting and found it funny, while in reality, I really didn't remember saying anything bad to her since I was ignoring the whole thing. He recently even went to a therapist a few times because he was feeling guilty about everything, I guess, but still can't say the word cheating. He didn't have the courage to tell me, so I guess he waited for me to find everything on his phone. Another event to mention is one night where they went out and got drunk, and he put a hand on her thigh. She asked him to go upstairs to have intimacy, and he said no. From what he told me, of course. We've been long distance for 2 years all this time, and he's been blaming it on that he couldn't do it and needed someone near him, someone near. I confronted him, and he became super clingy, repeating he's sure he wants me. From my side, it looks like I already gave him a chance in August when we got back together, and I'm tired. A part of me wants to act like nothing happened, but I think I'm still too shocked to make a decision. How can I ever forget him? So my boyfriend cheated on me, and I have no idea what to do next. Break up with him or try to work things out. I'm really tired of giving him chances, though, and I feel like his feelings for me are not that strong if these things happen frequently. Thanks to whoever reads this 3. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This just seems like a situation that has run its course for both of you. He clearly is looking for something else when he tells the girl how she's the one that makes him feel alive. You're clearly over how he treats you, and the two of you knew there were issues, hence having to take a break. Also, as someone who has done long distance, that just adds to the difficulty, especially when there's no end in sight. This feels like the two of you just running back to what's familiar, when you probably should have just broken up. When you need to go through his phone, the trust is broken, and there's rarely a way to repair it. Just end it for both of your sake. Comment 2. Ex-boyfriend. You need to call it what it is. You aren't coming back from this. Not only was he emotionally invested, the comments about liking seeing you guys fight are gross and just a whole different level of disrespect. He actually enjoyed making you upset. That's a hell no. I think realistically, he's only hanging around because she ended it. Find someone who respects you. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments from my last post, 3. So, a lot has happened in the past 3 months, and it's been very eventful of emotions. After finding those messages, I confronted my boyfriend again. This time, I was more direct and told him that I knew everything. He didn't deny it, but he tried to downplay the situation, saying that it was just a mistake and that he was confused. He kept insisting that he loved me and wanted to make things right. I decided to take a break from him to clear my head. During this time, I focused on myself and tried to figure out what I really wanted. I started hanging out with my friends more and even picked up a new hobby, painting. It was therapeutic and helped me process my emotions. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't just ignore what had happened. One day, while I was at a coffee shop with my friend, I received a message from my boyfriend. He said he wanted to meet and talk things through. I was hesitant, but I agreed. When we met, he seemed genuinely remorseful and told me that he had been going to therapy regularly. He said that he was working on his issues and wanted to prove to me that he could change. He even suggested that we go to couples therapy together. I was torn. On one hand, I could see that he was making an effort to change, but on the other hand, I couldn't shake off the betrayal. I decided to give couples therapy a try, thinking that it might help us rebuild our trust. The sessions were intense, and we had to confront a lot of uncomfortable truths. It was during one of these sessions that he admitted to having deeper feelings for the other girl than he had initially let on. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like I was back to square one, questioning everything. I started to wonder if I was just a safety net for him, someone he could fall back on when things didn't work out with her. This thought consumed me, and I found it hard to focus on anything else. My work started to suffer, and I became more withdrawn. Around this time, I got a call from my mom. She could sense that something was wrong and asked me to come home for a few days. I decided to take her up on the offer, hoping that a change of scenery would help me clear my mind. While I was home, I had a long conversation with my mom about everything that had happened. She reminded me of my worth and told me that I deserved someone who would treat me with respect and honesty. This conversation was a turning point for me. I realized that I had been holding on to the idea of my boyfriend rather than the reality of who he was. I decided that I needed to take control of my life and make a decision that was best for me. When I returned, I told my boyfriend that I needed some space to figure things out. He was upset, but agreed to give me the time I needed. During this period of reflection, I started to think about our relationship from the beginning. I remembered how we met in college and how we used to spend hours talking about our dreams and aspirations. But I also remembered the red flags that I had ignored, like his tendency to flirt with other girls and his inability to take responsibility for his actions. These memories made me realize that our relationship had always been flawed, and I had been too blinded by love to see it. One night, I was scrolling through old photos on my phone when I came across a picture of us from our first anniversary. We looked so happy and in love, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. I knew that the person in that photo was not the same person I was dealing with now. This realization gave me the strength to make a decision. I called my boyfriend and asked him to meet me. When we met, I told him that I couldn't continue the relationship. I explained that the trust had been broken and that I needed to prioritize my own well-being. He was devastated and begged me to reconsider, but I stood my ground. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I knew it was the right decision. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing. I continued with my painting and even started taking a yoga class. I reconnected with old friends and made an effort to be more social. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like I had made a mistake, but I reminded myself that I deserved better. Looking back, I realized that my boyfriend's actions were a reflection of his own insecurities and issues. He had a pattern of seeking validation from others and couldn't handle being alone. This was something that he needed to work on, and I couldn't be the one to fix him. I also realized that I had my own issues to work on, like my tendency to ignore red flags and my fear of being alone. As I continued to work on myself, I started to feel more confident and empowered. I knew that I had made the right decision, and I was excited about the future. I didn't know what it held, but I was ready to face it head on. Thanks for reading 3. Aita for confronting my boyfriend about his ex. After he finally planned a date. I've been dating my boyfriend for about 8 or 9 months or so now. My boyfriend has been in a tough financial situation in his life, so I never expect him to pay or take me on expensive dates. I just honestly really want quality time spent, even a free museum date or a day in the park. I send him ideas on free places to check out or nice views, but it doesn't feel like an actual plan ever comes out to play. I do clearly tell him that I want to visit this or check these things out, but it doesn't feel like he actually takes initiative to create a plan. I do know he isn't good at organizing things or planning things as well in general, but it sucks that it feels like it can't even happen once for us. I just really wish for a picnic date with flowers and fruits, something simple with the person I love, and it breaks my heart to wonder if that would ever happen with him. I feel like if he was in a better position in his life, maybe that could be possible, because then he could focus more on those things. But I also don't believe he doesn't care about me just because he doesn't do it. I just worry about the relationship not really progressing to those things or being complacent in a way. I guess I'm just trying to understand where our mindset lies with this stuff so I can try to communicate with him without being too harsh or emotional. I just want him to plan a date and create something where I don't have to think about what it is or where. I just want quality time spent with him. I know that his ex also complained a lot to him that he didn't take her on dates or plan things, but she was more into luxury stuff and expensive dates. I don't really care about that stuff too much. I also haven't had flowers in a really long time. It makes me feel really sad. But to add, he does show he cares about me in other ways, so I don't want to just push away all the other things because dates and flowers aren't really in the picture. Even if it's not flowers, just something at all, like even a letter or anything. I stay with him every weekend and drive an hour to his place. He's not able to stay with me currently, so it feels like I invest a lot. And I feel bad when I go there and nothing is planned or arranged. How can I communicate to my boyfriend that I also value planned dates and receiving flowers? I don't want to be direct and say, I want flowers and dates planned. I feel like I'm struggling with dealing with my emotions on how it feels to not receive them and how to communicate it to him in a way where he understands that I just also value those things and want them as well. It feels really wrong and sad to even ask for those things as well. But I think it may just be my ego. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You know what hurts his feelings worse than telling him he's not doing enough? Telling him that you are dumping him because he didn't do enough. And that's the logical progression of you sparing his feelings at the expense of not getting your needs met. And he's not doing enough. You can't stay in a relationship where you do all of the work and bear all the expense of keeping it. It's not just a matter of you proving your worth to him. He needs to be showing you that he's worth dating as well. He's being boring and useless. What you need to say to him is this: Hey boyfriend, I think we have a problem. Lately I've been feeling really unappreciated. You never buy me flowers or do me favors. And I do all the work planning our dates, all the driving, and I even pay for them. I don't think we're going to last unless you start matching my energy a bit better. Why don't you decide what we're going to do for the next few weeks? Think of something you think I'd enjoy doing. Treat me to something. It doesn't have to be something expensive, just thoughtful or fun or interesting. You've had plenty of time to get to know the kind of things I like. Comment 2. I know that his ex also complained a lot to him that he didn't take her on dates or plan things, but she was more into the luxury stuff and expensive dates. Honestly, I'm a little bit suspicious about whether this is true. I see this all the time in crappy partners who use their ex as an excuse for whatever they don't want to do. House chores? My ex was a lazy tyrant, and now I get flashbacks if I need to empty a trash can. Buying gifts? My ex was super greedy, and now I'm going to hint that you're just like them if you complain about my shitty low-effort gifts. Planning a date? Nothing ever made my ex happy, so I'm never going to plan one for you. Basically, it doesn't matter if his ex was greedy. You're not her. Stop trying to prove that you aren't her by being the super chill girlfriend who totally doesn't mind doing all the heavy lifting in the relationship. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments from my last post. So, a lot has happened in the past few days. After reading your advice, I decided to have a heart-to-heart with my boyfriend. I didn't want to come off as demanding, so I tried to be as gentle and understanding as possible. I told him how much I value our time together, and how I sometimes wish we could do something special, even if it's just a simple picnic. I mentioned that I love flowers and little gestures, but I also reassured him that I appreciate all the other ways he shows he cares. He listened quietly, and I could see he was really taking it in. He apologized for not realizing how important these things were to me, and promised to make more of an effort. I felt a bit relieved, but I was also cautious. I didn't want to get my hopes up too high. The next day, he surprised me by suggesting we go to a nearby park he had found online. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was a start. We packed some sandwiches and fruits, and he even brought a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked himself. It was such a sweet gesture, and it made me feel really special. We spent the day talking, laughing, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I'd been longing for. But then, things took an unexpected turn. On our way back, we ran into his ex at a coffee shop. It was awkward, to say the least. She seemed surprised to see us together and made a few snide comments about how he never took her on dates like this. I could see my boyfriend getting uncomfortable, and I felt a pang of jealousy. I didn't want to let it ruin our day, so I tried to brush it off. Later that evening, we talked about the encounter. He admitted that his ex's comments had bothered him, and that he felt guilty for not being able to give her what she wanted. I could see he was struggling with some unresolved feelings, and it made me wonder if he was truly over her. It was a tough conversation, but I told him that I needed to know if he was fully committed to our relationship. He assured me that he was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The next day, I decided to dig a little deeper. I found out that his ex had been more than just a girlfriend. She had been his first love. They had been together for years, and their breakup had been messy. She had always wanted a more luxurious lifestyle, and he had never been able to provide that for her. It made me realize that his reluctance to plan dates and do special things for me wasn't just about money. It was also about his fear of not being enough. I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I understood him better and felt closer to him. On the other hand, I was worried that his past would continue to haunt our relationship. I didn't want to be constantly compared to his ex, or feel like I was competing with her ghost. That evening, I decided to confront him about it. I told him what I had found out and how it made me feel. He was surprised but grateful for my honesty. He admitted that he had been carrying a lot of guilt and insecurity from his past relationship, and that it had affected his ability to be fully present with me. He promised to work on it and to make more of an effort to show me how much he cares. The next day, he surprised me again. This time, he had planned a visit to a free art exhibit in the city. It was something I had mentioned wanting to do, and it meant a lot to me that he had remembered. We spent the day exploring the exhibit, and it felt like a fresh start for us. I could see he was trying, and it made me feel hopeful. But as we were leaving the exhibit, we ran into his ex again. This time, she was with a new guy, and she seemed genuinely happy. She came over to say hi, and I could see my boyfriend tense up. She made a few more comments about how he had never taken her to places like this, and I could see it was getting to him. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I didn't want her to have this power over him or our relationship. That night, we had another long talk. I told him that I needed him to let go of his past and focus on our future. He agreed and said he would try, but I could see it was going to be a process. I realized that his past was a part of who he was, and I had to accept that if I wanted to be with him. In the end, we both agreed to take things one day at a time. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was willing to try. I loved him, and I believed in us. It was a bittersweet realization, but it also felt like a step in the right direction. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.